organizations and these leaders at these organizations, in my experience, which is fairly limited, are the exception. I mean, they're doing phenomenal work in this area, and that's why they were asked here today, and I'm happy to have had experiences with all their organizations, and they're even understating how great they are. You know, I met with Linda very early on. I'm serious. I met with Linda very early on, and such innovative work that they're doing in engagement. And, you know, you ask some questions, great questions about how do you manage this process. I mean, it's HR. It's HR. And even little organizations need HR, whether you're a for-profit or not-for-profit, and how do you make that a part of the culture of your organization? And really, that's what we're about at Experience Matters, is we're really trying to create a culture of engagement for our community and for its organizations that fosters work and service opportunities for adults in the second half of life. I mean, that's our whole mission statement. And getting at that cultural piece is proving to be harder than I have to say I initially expected. So I'm fairly new to the not-for-profit world. I've been in business in my whole career. I suppose I would be a poster child for some of Mark's work. And just came to the conclusion that I loved what I was doing. I really enjoyed it, but I was ready to do something totally different. I really didn't want to do that anymore. And it took me several years to figure out what did have meaning and purpose for me, and the answer ended up being Experience Matters. And I came to understand what was going on in the nonprofit world when I started this position. There had been a lot of research done and a lot of studies. Carol and the Piper Trust talked about models of significant service. There was a Harvard study. MetLife has done a bunch of research. And what I take away from all that is, you know, there's this huge demographic of baby boomers. They want to engage, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. They want to engage in a slightly different way than the generation before them, and are we adapting to that? All that data proved completely accurate to me. In other words, I met thousands of people who fit that profile. They really want to be a part of this. They want to do all the sort of stuff we're talking about today. So why don't we just get them in there? How hard can this be? We'll build a website. We'll get them connected. That was my solution. Wrong. So wrong. Talk about having your ladder on the wrong wall. I was really in the wrong place, and fortunately I learned that pretty early on, that this was not that kind of solution. As I started networking in the community around the nonprofit world, what I discovered is that I felt like, and when we talk about nonprofits for our organization, it's a pretty wide net. It's not just the human service and arts organizations. It's government, education, healthcare, and faith-based. So really, it's the whole community. We like to bring them all into the work that we're doing. And what I found was many of them said, yes, want more of that talent. And then when you get under the covers of their organization, they do not have a culture within their organization where any of this talent would want to land. You know, for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I'm going to go through one little cycle. You know, this is fairly common, and I think many of you will recognize this, and many of this will recognize from organizations that you have been your grantees or that you have been involved with. Is, you know, it sort of starts out like this: boy, we need help, don't we? Yes. Okay. We don't have any money though. Darn. So how are we going to get this done? I know. Let's get some volunteers. This will be great, and it won't require any money, and we really won't have to put much energy into this, will we? So here we go. Let's put out the call, and we get a lot of people signed up, and you will get a lot of people signed up. People want to help. So they started, and they say, great, and there isn't a lot of thought in the process. There isn't an interview process. There isn't a screen. There isn't training. Training for the volunteer as well as for the folks within the organization who will be supervising them. I mean, you were just talking about how much energy it takes to do that, right? So we may have a staff person oversee the effort, but it's not usually a very highly accountable position. I always equate it to the high school counselor. I don't know about, but I had teenagers, lots of them, and they attended 3 different local high schools, and I have to say, in every experience, and one was a private high school, every experience was in most cases, the high school counselor was someone who couldn't make it anywhere else in school. It was just like, how hard could this be? We'll give it to them. Really, does that not happen? It does. To be honest with you, you guys are the exception. Many times it's just someone who's willing to do the job. And so then they say, wow, you know, that didn't work. We didn't get what we wanted. People weren't really talented. It's kind of hit or miss. That was a lot of effort. We're disappointed. This whole volunteer thing, not for our organization, right? And so I think that's not an uncommon cycle for a lot of organizations. I run into some big ones who have people coming to them who want to engage, and they really have been down that road and they don't want to continue down it any further. So one of the things we brought to Arizona was a program that came out of Temple University. They have a program they collaborate with Coming of Age. It's called the Learning Lab. These organizations have all participated, and they were pretty far along to begin with. But what the Learning Lab is, it's a 3-day workshop teaching the organization itself about what the value is here and how you might start creating that culture within your organization. So one of the things we start with is, you know, this whole cohort chart. And I'm sure Mark knows this way better than I do. But, you know, depending on when you came of age, your values are a little bit different. And, you know, this is my parents' generation. And the traditionalists tend to like the volunteer programs as Linda has had traditionally. You know, just tell me when to be there. It's a very compliant group. They really just want to put in the number of hours. They want to get a pin, you know, for the number of hours. And they do, it's like that. And give me something fairly simple, and it's a social network, and I don't really want to have some input. They don't question authority. They don't normally come back and say, you should be doing this a totally different way. And to the boomers, and I really like what Mark had to say about this, because I run into this question a lot. There is definitely a shift in the way this group thinks, but it follows all the way down. It's not just like here and then we go back, or here and then we'll be completely different. And I'm sure there will be new attributes as this group moves up. But right now, this is the largest available talent pool. They are coming into, this demographic is coming into the volunteer workforce, if you will. And I really hate the word volunteer. You know the word senior, you know, which I will never be. Also volunteer. You know, I really want to be an unpaid staff or an unpaid consultant or something like that. I really don't want. Volunteer has now, I think, a fairly negative connotation, and it's going to be tricky to figure out how we're going to change the language around that. But I have to say, if someone said, do you want to come volunteer for something? No, not so much. But Norah, we have a special project around this particular skill set that does this and this. Would you mind doing a little unpaid consulting gig for us? Sure. Easy. Happy to. I mean, it just plays into my ego. Seriously. And I feel like I'm a part of the team. And I'm right in the gig. So it's all that. And then it does trickle down to these other generations. And Mark touched on it, you know, the math on this is staggering. You know, there's 78 million. And of that, interestingly enough, of the 78 million in the 1946 to 64, 60 million is in the first 10 years. So it's really in one huge lump right there at the very beginning. This is one of the things we go through in the Learning Lab, and we really like to talk about why there's a shift here. And even if you have done an excellent job in the organization around volunteer engagement, why you might need to rethink that for the group that's coming through now. And the type of skills that you might be able to bring to the table. So what we have here are the traditionalist generation before and the boomers, and what they're looking for out of all these things. You know, they really want to know they're making a difference, that you're using me to the top level of my capacity, that I want to contribute. I thought Linda's point was excellent. I serve meals at St. Vincent de Paul. I mean, sometimes I just want to do that. And that's fine. But, you know, understand that about that. They like to work on projects and be team-based. Traditionalists, not so much. They really don't want to be in the decision-making process as much. They want to be change agents. Sometimes they want to get a social network out of this. So are you creating that as a part of the solution? So that's one of the things we do at the Learning Lab. And it's tricky business. Because if it's not really starting with the CEO, it's going to be very difficult to create a change within the organization. All three of these organizations have either the CEO here or the CEO of the organization who are real thought leaders in this area. And even so, Linda, you shared some stories with me in the past where some of the big departments within the hospital are saying, no thanks, right? They don't want to integrate. Yeah, they don't, I don't want any of that highly skilled stuff in my department. So getting a culture change, yeah. So creating that level of culture change is a little bit tricky. And I think, Michelle, is that Sunny? Correct, that you get people, particularly people who have had experience in another organization doing this for a long time, that sometimes it's hard to get them over the fence about the value and how to integrate it into the organization successfully. Skill level, I don't know what's wrong with my slide here. Skill level boomers are falling. The different skills they bring to the table, and I think being adaptive about how you implement those skills in your organization. And again, I think you heard all this from these three, but most organizations aren't very good at this. They want to take the simple route. They want to, give me the easy way to do this. We'll have the volunteers fill out a form and tell them to go. Okay, we'll give them, all right. We'll give them an hour of training. And then they gotta go. I mean, because it's a huge investment on the part of the organization for the time. I am experienced that to get the organization to commit, the Learning Lab is 3 days long. It's very nearly free, thanks to contributions that was helped by Piper, and now the Pulliam Trust has supported us for 2011. I charge something because otherwise people don't show up. It's amazing. But just to get them to commit the 3 days of investment of time of the staff. And I like to get board members there as well, because just as the leadership drives this sort of thing, so they can be part of the thought process on that. And I find the board members identify with this information completely, and it starts to drive change throughout the entire organization. So again, getting them to invest the time. These are the types of skills that you can get more of now, which hasn't been traditional roles for volunteers, or we really encourage a stipend model, and there's a number of different reasons for that. I know there are legal issues, but there's just a little bit of skin in the game, and the way the person perceives that they're valued and the way other people in the organization treat them when there is a stipend around it is quite critical. You don't even know that I did this, do you? Sorry. Johnson Lincoln, this is Linda's organization. I went out to visit Linda, and I came up with this little slide after our meeting. 178,000. Do I have the number right?
That's 2009. 2010 was 198,000.
Even better. Volunteer hours at, the federal rate is $19.73 or something like that per hour, and I think that is both high and low, but mostly low. So that is $3.5 million of financial resources to Johnson Lincoln, so now over $4 million in financial resources. Not including donation and legacy gifts. By the way, 90% of all people who volunteer give. Think about that one, another missed opportunity here. So I said if you had an operating budget of $750,000, which everyone reacts to the way you did, like, I'll never get a budget like that. That's a 500% return. I mean, I'm a recovering accountant. This is how I look at the world. Really, the ROI, here it is. So my feeling is, and it hasn't totally evolved as a concept, but somewhere you play a role in all this. Somewhere as grantees, you're going to have to help drive this thought process. And I don't know how that happens entirely. I have some ideas. But the point is, I think you have a lot of influence here to bear on organizations. One, in providing resources. And a lot of your organizations provide resources that go beyond just giving money. Sometimes it's training and other, other time and talent, evaluation resources, things like that you bring to the table. But is this something you're asking organizations to evaluate? And can we make this, I'd like it to be part of the audit. I'd like this to be a top line number. I mean, really, if you had someone who was bringing $4 million into the hospital, right? The head of that department is a senior executive. And then, right? They're bringing $4 million into your organization and their department has a 500% return. They're a senior executive at the table. They're in the senior management meetings. But I think that is pretty rare in the nonprofit world. And I'm going to include government and other organizations in this. It's just not, it's seen as free. They're free. So the value's kind of low. And I think this is part of the culture shift that we're about. We talked a little bit about this, different ways we can engage folks from that demographic. This is about experience matters, and I already talked about our mission is to create this culture in our community. And it's been a very interesting discussion point at our advisory board meetings of how do we go about this and where are we hitting. Again, it's a fairly new organization. We're only a couple of years old. So we're able to sort of change and adapt pretty quickly. We don't have a lot of infrastructure. So what are the ways that you might be able to participate pretty simply? One is, and I left you a packet of materials where you're sitting. One is, I would really encourage you to send your grantees to the Learn Lab. We have another one coming up in May. We take 35 people, 35 to 40 people. I like to get a couple of people from each organization there if I can, because the thought process is far better when they're working there collaboratively. It's professionally facilitated. We give them breakfast and lunch. They do a lot of work during it. They learn things about recruiting, how to develop job descriptions, how to create a position for someone, how to understand what am I doing? 1 minute left. How to understand, I thought, what am I doing wrong? Something's wrong. How to create those kinds of positions in their organization and how to start that culture shift. Encore Fellowships, that's actually a model that comes out of Civic Ventures. Very exciting model. Piper has sponsored our first Seed Fellow, so I'm recruiting someone for Experience Matters. This person will serve 1,000 hours over the next 12 months and get paid a $20,000 stipend. And if I could tell you the quality of folks that I have competing for this position. I have a gal who's a marketing executive of Dial, Hinkle, phenomenal. A guy who sold his business, who started his business and sold it very successfully, phenomenal. I have another guy who's a professional recruiter, 2 HR executives, another Intel executive, and they're sending me the little thank you notes for the interview and could I please, am I still in the running and what are the next steps? I mean, they're competing for this position, so there is a huge pent-up demand. We would like to do a class of about 10 Encore Fellows in this coming year. The cost to do an entire Encore Fellowship is about $30,000. And of that, about $21,000 goes right back out to the fellow to pay the stipend and the stipend costs. And the rest of it goes into creating the program. So we'll have, we think about 25 organizations applying for a fellowship. So they're going to ask to host an Encore Fellow, and we think we'll have about 25 applicants for fellowships, and then we'll match them. Sponsors pay $10,000, host organizations pay, sponsors pay $20,000, host organizations pay about $10,000. I don't know if that math all makes sense to you. We do have a number of sponsors stepping up. Lodestar is going to participate in the program. Intel, we believe, will be participating in the program. They'll be speaking tonight at the event, and the Piper Trust. So if you have an area of interest that you would like to place a fellow, highly skilled person who could really elevate the game at some of the organizations where they'll be participating, please do that. And then we offer Explore Your Future workshops, and I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it really helps individuals figure out what they want to do.